Hi everyone, how are you doing? My name's Stephanie and I teach people how to reduce, take a break or stop drinking. And this little video is all about that pesky voice. So this is one of the things I get asked a lot. How do I deal with the voice, the thoughts about alcohol, thinking about drinking? Okay, so the bottom line is really what we want to do is we want to make alcohol insignificant. The last thing we want is, whether you're reducing, taking a break or stopping, that you are spending all your time thinking about drinking. That is not what we want at all. There are far more pleasurable things that you could be thinking about, because essentially what we think impacts on how we feel. And if you're getting caught up in thinking about drinking, it might be a bit like, and it's not actually going to help you in the long run. Now, there might be a period of time where you just start to make changes and actually you are thinking about drinking, and that's okay. But over time, in the long run, what we want is we want you to just to be a non-event, really, like peas. You don't think about peas a lot, so we don't want you thinking about alcohol a lot, okay? Now, one of the first things to do if you have loud internal dialogue or a lot of thoughts is to start reducing and build up those alcohol-free days. Now, the reason for this is alcohol is a drug. It's a drug that impacts on how you think and feel, and it impacts on your brain chemistry. And for a lot of people, what will happen with their drinking is, say you drink a bottle of wine a night, chances are you're waking up in the middle of the night, maybe you're having some anxiety, maybe you're noticing that your anxiety is heightened after the day after drinking. As part of that, maybe that you are noticing that you are having louder internal dialogue, that it's quite negative, and you're just generally giving yourself a hard time. That's part of how the alcohol works on our brain and our brain chemistry, okay? So learning how to ignore, distract, turn the sound down on the voice whilst taking a drug that increases, causes and exacerbates depression and anxiety and impacts on our thinking, it's not going to work. So the first thing we want to do is reduce, build up some alcohol-free days and get some quick wins in terms of what's going on with your brain chemistry and your thinking, okay? Now, for some people, when they reduce, take a break and stop, they will notice that the pesky voice just isn't a problem. Fantastic, win-win. But for other people, they will notice that it's still there. However, it's still easier to try the techniques once you started reducing. Now, there isn't a length of time for this. Usually when people work with me one-to-one and sometimes in my groups, they can get quite quick results within the first couple of weeks of reducing and taking a break, and then we can start trying some stuff around this, okay? So a couple of things to be aware of, and I'm sure you know exactly what I mean by this. You know, when we do diets, when we focus on what we can't have, then we're thinking about what we can't have, and that doesn't help us, yeah? It's like if I say to you, don't think about pink elephants, most of you will have made a picture about a pink elephant. It's just how our brain works, okay? There's nothing wrong with you. So if you're thinking about not drinking, you're thinking about drinking, and that's not helping you, okay? But don't give yourself a hard time. It takes time to figure this stuff out, and you can get the shift. It does happen, all right? So one of the easiest ways to work with this in the early days is to focus on something else. Distraction. It sounds really simple, but it works. So finding things that when you do them, you are not in your head. So what we're looking for here are things that you do that get you out of your head in a healthy way, not alcohol or drugs, okay? So think about activities that you do when you're not in your head. Just notice when you're not in your head and think, oh, what am I doing? You know, that might be things like playing with the children, or cooking, or playing a musical instrument, or some sort of creative activity, or walking or running, or being in nature, or cuddling, or being intimate. It could be anything. Just notice when you're not in your head and then do more of that if you possibly can. Yeah, definitely. So part of this sometimes is also about our process. So we take in information through our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, smell and taste. And for some of you, you will have a dominant auditory process. So you will be very aware of your thinking and loud internal dialogue. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just part of your process and we need to work with that, okay? So sometimes this is about learning how to ignore, turn the sound down on the voice, okay? Now there's a lovely little technique if you're good at visualizing. It's just being aware of your thoughts and visualizing them like leaves on a stream. So you visualize a stream running past you and leaves on those stream, and you just visualize each thought like plopping onto those leaves and passing. So you just notice them, you don't fuse with them, and they just roll on by, okay? You can think of your thoughts as, or your loud voice as backseat drivers. I think they're very similar to that. You know, if you're in a car and you're driving and people are telling you what to do, you're like, oh, for God's sake, shut up, because you can't concentrate. So being able to separate them and be objective, you know, being able to tell them to shut up and ignore them. You can give it a name. Sometimes people give it a name. So quite often the internal dialogue, the pesky voice, is quite negative. It's not very nice. You know, if you spoke to a friend like that, well, you probably wouldn't speak to a friend like that. That's the point. So why are you talking to yourself like that? So sometimes it can help to give it a name and see it as a separate entity. And again, to ignore it, tell it to shut up, laugh at it, anything like that. Now, the bottom line, some of us, if you have an auditory process, will have a lot of random thoughts, and you'll be very aware of that. Again, there's nothing wrong with you, it's just part of your process. And finding a practice that's going to help you to ignore, turn the sound down, distract, get out of your head in a healthy way will really help you, okay? And it is a practice. But the first thing to do is to reduce and build up some alcohol-free days, then try some of these techniques. I teach more of these techniques in my accountability group. It's £29 a month. I will post a link with this video. Any questions, please ask.